All right, guys, I wanted to take this time to go through the characteristics of living things. And so, here in the very beginning, I just want you to pick one of these things and I want you to think about it. Can you describe to me why these three things, one of these three things, would be considered a living thing? Pause the video, see if you can go back to some of the information we've been talking about or that you've been learning about, and see if you can do it. Okay, hopefully at this point, what you started to do was you started to look at some of these characteristics that we would say are required for things to be living. And they are having cells, using energy, reproduction, growth and development, responding to a stimulus, and then moving. You have to have those six things if you are considered to be alive. Number one being you have to have cells. And every organism has to be made up of cells. And it can either be one cell or many cells. That's the difference between unicellular organisms, they're made up of one cell, and multicellular organisms, which are made up of multiple cells. An amoeba is made up of one cell. We can actually see two amoebas here, but amoebas are considered to be a living thing. They are microscopic organisms. They are protists, and we can see them here with each having their own individual cell. So two amoebas right here, made up of cells. In order to be alive, you also have to use and obtain energy for whatever you need that for to grow, develop, repair damage, reproduce. Everything needs to use and obtain energy. The amoeba obtains energy in the same way that you do. It has to eat. Here we see it eating a paramecium in order to obtain some energy. Okay, so you'll see it surround this paramecium for the purpose of obtaining that energy. You have to be able to reproduce in order for you to be considered alive. This would cause your organism or your species to be successful. And successful in this case just means that you're able to pass on your genes. That is the main goal of any organism. An amoeba will pass on its genes, will reproduce by splitting. So you'll go from one cell into two cells. You can see it in the GIF here. If you watch some of those cells closely, every once in a while they will split and become two cells instead of just being one. Growth and development is the fourth thing that is required. So you have to be able to grow, whether that means that you are increasing in size or you are increasing in the amount of cells that you have. You guys, from the time that you are born to the time that you are now, have developed an increase in cells. You have way more cells than you used to. For example, you have way more blood cells now than you used to when you were a baby. You also have to have development, which means a change in form. Take a look at the chick versus the chicken. The chick looks very different from the chicken. There is a change in form over the span of its life. The same thing for you. When you were a baby, you looked very different from how you look now. You also have to be able to adjust to the environment, or this is what we've been considering a response to a stimulus. If I were to stand in the front of the room and start screaming, you would all look at me. That is you responding to the stimulus of me screaming. The same thing happens for your body. If your body gets too cold, like you see in the shivering picture, your body will start to shiver. That is your body's way of warming itself up. If your body gets way too hot, your body will start to sweat in order to cool itself down. This is what we would call homeostasis. This is the body's ability to maintain a constant, steady condition. If it wants to be in a certain temperature, it will maintain that temperature. You can also see this happening with things like the amount of sugar. Everybody just celebrated a little bit of Halloween, probably went trick-or-treating, got a whole lot of candy. Now, when you eat that candy, you're putting a ton of sugar into your bloodstream. Your body doesn't like all that sugar. It tastes good, but your body has to find balance. And so what it does is it releases insulin, and that insulin goes around in your bloodstream and helps absorb some of that sugar to bring it back down to balance. Okay, and so the response to the stimulus of the amoeba here, and when an amoeba feels something surrounding it or feels something touching it, it will then surround that object to potentially consume it like it's doing with the paramecium here again. It senses that paramecium and then surrounds it. It's responding to a stimulus. The last thing here is movement. And all organisms, if you're alive, have to move. And so we see this even in plants. You guys may have noticed that I rotate my plants in my room. They face a window, but eventually those plants move to face the sunlight. They respond to a stimulus by moving to face the sunlight. So all things, in order to be considered alive, have to do some sort of movement. Now, the question that we said in the beginning, all organisms have to have six, but do they really? In general, the majority, yes, you have to have six. There are some exceptions. An example here would be a mule and a liger. Mules and ligers can do 5 of them. They cannot reproduce. In order to get mules, you have to take a donkey and a horse, but you can never take a mule and get more baby mules. You have to have a horse and a donkey. Same thing for a liger, which is a combination of a lion and tiger. You can't take 2 ligers and get baby ligers. However, you can take a lion and a tiger, and you will end up with a liger. Question for you guys to think about, a thing for you guys to think about is viruses. And we will investigate this more as we get further into our cell unit. But the question arises, are viruses considered to be a living thing? Okay, and I want you guys to start thinking about that. Do they have the characteristics of living things? We'll investigate that a little bit later. Guys, if you have any question on characteristics of life, anything at all, you let me know. I am here to answer any of these questions that you may have. Until then, I'll see you guys later.